Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. We're back here with another episode of Fact Friday, which apparently is frequently asked questions. I say that every time, don't I? I'll have to come up with a different banter. Anyway, as ever, please subscribe. There should be links around here. Of course, if you go to producelikeapro.com, you can sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies. Anyway, let's get stuck in. Oh, and by the way, did you check out Lancaster Audio for a whole bunch of amazing IRs? It's a company that I started with Rosen Digital, who are already really big in the IR world, and with Glenn Fricker over at Spectra Sound Media. So yeah, it's pretty fun. So check that out. There'll be links for that as well. All right, let's get started. Question number one. I've got a very important question for you. PG tips, Twinings, Tetley or Yorkshire? PG tips. I grew up on PG tips. Tetley occasionally, Brook Bond, do you remember that? But PG tips, PG tips and PG tips. That's what we had in our household, and that's what I still drink to this day. I'm sure it's not the preferred blend of most of us, but it's the one I love. Can't beat good old PG tips. Is there any truth to trying to tune your kick drum to the key of the song to somehow make it sit better with the bass guitar? Wow, that's a really good question. I think in timpani, and if you want to try and do a more Motown influenced track or a classic kind of orchestral piece, then definitely take timpani and tune it to the track. I've done that quite a few times where I've had the bass line being mirrored by timpani. So boom, 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 you know, like had a bass line mirrored with timpani. But as far as an actual kick drum being specifically tuned to the track, that's a tough one. I mean, you could, if you wanted to use like an 808 tone and find the key center, it's possible, but I don't know. It's not something I've specifically done. I've usually, not all the time, but most of the time, treated the kick drum as a percussive only instrument. Now, with toms and with snare drums, I've many times tuned to the song. I remember Ross from the Drum Doctor would very often come along back in the old days and tune the snare to the key of the song. And then you do 1, 3, 5. So, you know, bom, 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 bom. So you'd have like dum, 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 dum. You know, you could have your toms tuned to the 3rd and the 5th and the root of the song. That's been done many times. It's not always the case. Sometimes it's just, again, percussive. It's a catch-22 because a major third might be great at one point in the song, but it might also conflict. So try it. Try it either way. You can do it. Kick drum, rarely, but snare drum, often, if you want to get that ring in tune. And again, toms, often, but not always. This is something I would experiment with on your own time and just see if it works. Especially if you have like drum samples that have tunings and you want to manipulate them. You could try that. It's always a great idea to try new things. I have a drum kit in a small room. Is it possible to get good results with 2 SM57s when recording a full kit? Wow, that's a huge question. I mean, anything is possible. If, number one, your drummer performs evenly. If your drummer is like kick, snare, you know, and just like plays the toms really like with passion and then keeps the cymbals within that realm of the rest of the drum kit. So it's like kick, snare, ba-da-dum, dum, ba-dum, ch. Great. As soon as it's da-da-dum, dum, da-dum, and the drummer is smashing the schnizzle out of the cymbals, as soon as that happens and all of that cymbal bleed is folding back into everything else, then it doesn't matter how many mics you've got. That's where, I should correct myself, that's where multiple mics would be better. So yes, 2 mics is always possible, but it does come down to the performance. And it comes down, number one, the performance. And then secondly, what are you trying to achieve? With only a pair of mics, maybe you'd put one on the ground in front of the kick and maybe you'd put one over the top. So then you're going to have a mono drum kit. You'll have a bit of control of the kick drum from the front mic, a few feet in front, and you'll have a bit of control of the snare and the toms, but as soon as those cymbals are hit too heavily, it folds in. So yes, you can do it with 2 mics quite easily, but you're going to have to work on the drummer's performance. So yes is the answer. You could obviously use a de-esser on the overhead mic if the cymbals were a little too loud. You can even put a little tiny bit of distortion to saturate the high end. But ultimately, you're always going to be at the mercy of the performer when you've got a limited amount of mics. The reason why we are now, using over the years have adopted more and more mics is so that you can sit there and blend, obviously, and make up for the lack of performance. When you're working with a young artist who's maybe only been playing drums a year or two, yes, you can coax them, but there may be only a certain level of performance you're ever going to get out of them. So, there's lots of things to think about. 2 mics will definitely work, but spend your time working with the drummer and getting their performance to be really, really even, and then you'll be able to obviously use the 2 mics. Which plugins do you use to align drums to grid? I don't align, there's no plugin that I use to align it to the grid. There are time adjuster plugins that I personally use just as, let's just say we've got like 3 kick drums and they're at different distances. I'll align them all to the furthest one out, which could be a nanosecond a little later. Just so with time adjuster in Pro Tools or whatever DAW, I'm just dragging them back slightly so that they're all in phase of each other. If I'm going to edit something tighter, then I edit it tighter. I don't use plugins for that. There are loads of drum align plugins. I don't personally use them. I don't want every hit to be absolutely perfect because it actually starts to sound a little smaller. The reason why room mics sound like room mics is because they're further back. So if I hit a crack, a snare like this, the room mic, at the other side of a large room is going to go. I don't want to put that exactly in time with the snare hit because then it's going to be just like, it's going to sound stunted. It's not going to have that effect of being in a big room. That's what we want. I want to preserve that sound. If I walk into a room, a big drum room, and the drummer's at the other end, I want those room mics to sound like the drummer's at the other end. So I'm always a little bit contentious with the drum align ones. I say try them, try aligning the mics. It's good for phase, but be aware that part of the drum sound is going to be different mics hearing at different times. It's really up to you how you do that, but to me it's more important to get the snare drum in phase with the overheads than anything else. I'll take the snare drum and slightly drag that back using time adjuster so that it's more body in the snare from the overheads. Plus, I always record my overheads in phase with the snare so they're equally measured away. That way, when the drummer goes around the drum kit, the toms, the snare, everything is in phase, and my overheads become a really good stereo image of the drum kit. So, but feel free to experiment. I don't think there's any right or wrong way. There's no experts here. Whatever works for you. Some people like to drum align everything, and they get great results out of it. Personally, I like a little bit of flexibility, and I like my room mics, etc., to be late. I like them to sound like room mics, But try what works for you. So this is a quick master tool, referring to the LMC. Yes, I mean, the thing about the LMC is it's, what's the best way of describing it? I mean, ultimately what the Lursen Mastering Console is and why we reviewed it was it is the acquired knowledge of Gavin and Ruben together and their equipment. So it's the equipment and their acquired knowledge. What I found great about it, especially for more organic stuff, is it sort of warmed up things. I hate saying the word warm, but I just did. It added lows. It made the high end smoother sounding, less brittle. It's really good for that. So you either can use it on your master bus or, like I was doing in that video, use it on individual bussing within the mix and then folding it into the end of the stereo mix. That's where I really, really liked it, when I combined all of those things together. It's just another plugin, another tool that we can use to create better mixes. There are so many great plugins out there. There's no one thing that everybody loves. So it's okay if you love it, and it's also okay if it doesn't make sense to you. That's absolutely fine. For me, I liked it because if I'm going to get some really, probably the wrong way of describing it, but harsher, more digitally recorded stuff to mix, the LMC seems to be a good way for me to insert something in there that I don't need to use saturation, I don't need to use a tape emulation, I don't need to EQ it heavily. It does it all in one plugin. it does a lot of that kind of quote unquote analog sound. And I know that's so subjective, and I don't want to get into a discussion about the words like warm and transparent and analog and all that stuff and emulations and tapes. There's so much subjectivity to that. But the reality is like most of us know what we're talking about. We're talking about reducing some of that digital harshness and like making things sound a little, you know, fatter and warmer. Did they high pass back in 1979? Heck yes. We get so many questions about high passing because there's so much confusion out there and so much disinformation. Absolutely. We've done so many videos where we take a kick drum and we high pass it up to 20 hertz and it gets louder because of all of that 20 hertz information that's in all these different mics that's just taking up energy in the mix. And you know, when people say, oh, but I don't hear it. Well, you don't hear it through speakers like this, but you'll sure as heck hear it through a PA. And more importantly, it will affect your mix. So high passing is what every professional mixer does. They just know how to high pass. They don't just say don't high pass. They just know how to do it properly. And so did they do it in 1979? Yes, they did. Not only did they do it, they did it a lot because going on to tape produced a lot of low end and low mid buildup, a ton of it. And going through consoles in those days that had transformers on the mic pre's, transformers on the line amps, transformers on the monitoring section and tape, you had mid-range and low buildup like crazy. So not only did they do it in the 70s, you know, 60s and even probably the 50s, not only did they do it then, they did it even more so than we do now because they had to shape that low end a lot more effectively. They didn't have access to equipment that had as much high passing that we do now. They didn't have millions of plugins and parametric and graphic EQs. Those came along, well, definitely in the 70s, but in the 50s and 60s, they weren't as available, if at all. So yes, high passing has been around forever and it is the secret for a good, clean mix. Nobody should high pass up to 500 hertz. That's silly. But taking out super, super low end rumble out of microphones across the board, shaping the low end on guitars, bass guitars, keyboards, vocals, and drums is really, really important to get a really loud, punchy mix. Can a room be too flat for mixing and mastering? Wow, what a fantastic question. I don't know the exact answer to that. I will say that a completely dead room is no fun to be in. It's really weird. When you're in a room that's really, really super flat, it's really a strange feeling to not hear any even super short reverberation. So I don't know if that answer is necessarily the right answer. That is something I think that we have to ask proper experts, proper acoustic treatment experts, not just producers, engineers and mixers, but like the really, really good guys that really know what they're talking about, of which there's loads. I have never been in a completely, what do they call it, an anechoic chambered room. I've never worked in one of those, so I can't really say whether it's better or not. I do know that if you go to NASA where they have one, I've watched a YouTube video, I don't know what it was called. It's very disconcerting trying to stand up in a room like that because it's so dead. There's no point of reference because your ears are not hearing. We're not bats, don't get me wrong. We're not using sonar, but we're so used to hearing sounds come back to us that our brain is calculating a lot of information that our ears hear. So I'm not sure how it would feel to mix in an anechoic chamber. Might be kind of strange. So I think there's probably a happy balance, but again, this is probably, I'm not an expert. Proper acoustic engineers are experts. I'm not. I don't know the exact answer, but I think probably not. But hey, I could be wrong. I start at university in September and will be studying music production. Do you have any tips or ideas that might help me maximize my learning? That's a wonderful question. Yes, make sure that you spend a lot of time outside of school making music, recording music. If you can intern at a studio and get to see how people work, how they interact with each other, do that. Because one of the things that you're never going to learn in school, and this is for anything, whether you're a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, a recording engineer, a producer, a mixer, it doesn't matter. This applies to all professions. The one thing that you're not going to learn when you're at school is the interaction between people. You can be a doctor and you can go and you can learn every single thing, but you still need to put it into practice, and you need to have a, as they say, a good bedside manner as a doctor. You need to be able to get the best out of a patient. You want to know what's wrong with the patient, where they're feeling pain. You don't come in there and go, oh, what's the problem? You go, how can I help you? It's the same thing with being a producer, an engineer, and a mixer. You have to understand basic psychology. If you're the kind of person that's kind of like thinks it's okay to troll and joke around and think that you're superior, that is not going to help you in a recording studio. It's not. You can't have a singer on the other side of the wall that's feeling really insecure about a vocal performance and tease them when they're not your friend and they're not somebody you know and you don't have that banter. You have to learn how to communicate. That's a big, big deal. When we do our live streams, we try to practice that and try to teach people how to communicate with each other, because this is a really, really important way to learn your craft. So if there's one thing that you should do outside of the school, is learn that. Work with others. Either collaborate or go and intern or do something that allows you to experience what it's really like to communicate with other musicians, other producers, other engineers. Like I said, doctors need to learn that, and they do. They go and intern, and they intern for hours. They do like horrific 80, 90, 100-hour weeks. I mean, we all hear those stories of locums at hospitals working 2-day shifts and stuff like that. What are they doing? Not only are they working really, really hard, they are experiencing what it's like to interact with the patients. That's the same thing when you're a producer engineer. You need to learn how to interact with artists and with other musicians and other producers and other mixers. It's something that we're really clear about and we try to help people with. Like I said, from anything from answering comments that we do on our YouTube channel or in the streams, is we are trying to help all of us as a community be supportive and help each other, because that is the way that you're going to grow, not only as an artist, producer, engineer, mixer, etc., but also as a person. And you'll grow your career massively by learning how to communicate and humble yourself, because I'm not an expert. I'm only as good as the artist I work with. And I can put all of my love and everything into that, but ultimately my job is to get great performances out of them, to get incredible songs from them. That's our job. So outside of school, cultivate that. Work with others, collaborate, and if you can, intern at a studio. All right, thank you everybody. It's been a marvelous Frequently Asked Questions Friday. I really enjoyed it. Please, as ever, sign up to the website, producerpro.com, get a whole bunch of free goodies. And check out Lancaster Audio for all your IR needs, impulse response needs. Thank you. I really appreciate all of this amazing comments. Please give us some comments and questions and more for more Fact Fridays. I really appreciate it. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing, and I'll see you all again very soon. And please subscribe.